introduction. And so in fact, I'm not going to really talk very specifically our own works, and all the papers are online. You can go to my website. I try to sort of bring up, I think, a question that I think every field should ask every 5 or 10 years. And also, there's going to be some controversial points I'm going to make in my talk. So I thought that's going to be more interesting, maybe more stimulating for a general audience. Before we get started, I'll just warn you that throughout this presentation, you will see some flashing and flying boxes just to get your attention. This is what graphics people do. So before you ask the question, why is computer graphics hard, you really have to ask, what is computer graphics? So let's start with sort of words on the street. You go for Wikipedia first. So there's a Wikipedia page on computer graphics, and the very first sentence says, computer graphics are pictures and movies created using computers, usually referring to image data. You see my highlighted words. And then there's also a Wikipedia page on computer graphics, brackets, computer science. So this is a more technical definition of computer graphics. And there it says, computer graphics focuses on the mathematical and computational foundations of image generation and processing. And I was not very happy to see image appearing so frequently in the in sort of a definition of computer graphics. So that's sort of words on the street. Now if you go to sort of the textbook on computer graphics, that would be this book written by a bunch of sort of big shots in computer graphics. It took them a very long time to get their third edition. Unfortunately, they have their latest edition from 2014. On the first page, it defines computer graphics in a very abstract way. It says computer graphics is the science and art of communicating visually via computer's display and its interaction devices. So that's rather abstract. On the second page, so they gave sort of a definition, more technical definition. Graphics is about taking a model of the object in the scene and also models of light emitted into the scene, and you're going to produce a representation of this scene from a particular angle. Okay, so then it sort of says this is really a glorified multiplication. You have sort of some matrices, some vectors, you have all these models explicitly specified. You do a multiplication, you get your scene. Okay, but they did admit at the end that this is sort of a narrow definition. You'll see sort of more a generic definition later on. And then these are the topics we cover in 360 for intro to computer graphics. And people who are taking this class will see these are familiar topics. So the point I want to make is that all of these topics are about model representation and rendering. And rendering, of course, is to produce an image at the end. So graphics is synthesis. So you make things. And the computer graphics is using sort of the shortest definition, computer-assisted synthesis. But the outsiders think computer graphics is only about producing pretty pictures. So the classical view of computer graphics is about scene setup and rendering. Okay, you set up a scene using geometric description of your objects. You have photometric description of lights and material properties, and then you illuminate and you do shading. In terms of what's important in this classical view, the efficiency of your rendering and also the realism of your rendering. It needs to look real. And in that sense, in a classical view of computer graphics, it's a forward problem. Okay, you start with an explicit model description, and then the final result is a rendered image of your scene from a particular angle. So I'll take a very simple example. If you want to render a scene of a quick brown fox jumps over a lazy dog, you need to have explicit models for brown fox, a dog, quick jump, and sleeping dog. Okay, quick jump means the quick is you can use something like speed line. Yeah, I was too lazy to really do it in a graphics way. I just sort of borrowed an image from Google image search. So it's a forward problem. You start with explicit model descriptions. So what about computer vision, which is certainly related, but in a classical way, they are kind of inverse of each other. So in that textbook, it describes computer vision as not a multiplication, but as a factorization problem. So you start with a given rendering of the scene, you ask a question about it. Actually, I want to determine what would be the parameters or models which would have led the rendering of this given scene. This is sort of a low-level definition of computer vision. At a high level is about understanding. You try to infer understanding of the scene that you're given. Okay, so what are in there and what they're doing. So in that sense, computer vision is an inverse problem. You start with a scene, you want to infer the model that was used to create such a scene. So just to go back to that example, you're given such an image, you want to infer that there is a fox, there's a dog, fox is jumping over the dog, and then other things. So graphics versus visual. On one hand, you have a multiplication. Okay, you're concerned with efficiency, and you do things fast for the realism. On the other hand, you have factorization. Okay, so if you've taken a linear algebra course, which one is harder? Is factorization harder, or is multiplication harder? I would say factorization is harder, both conceptually and also computationally. So then, of course, we ask ourselves, graphics, we should ask ourselves, why, how can computer graphics be hard? So let me just remind one thing. I'm not going to jump to the new view, or my new view yet. Let's remind ourselves why graphics is hard in a sort of in a classical thinking. So I'm going to ask, what would be the one big difference? We were talking about computer vision, computer graphics. What would be the one big difference between data in computer graphics and the data in computer vision? Think the data. I thought there's an obvious answer. I think computer vision deals mainly with image data. You have video data is just basically a series of image data. And in computer graphics, inevitably have to deal with three-dimensional data. Okay, let's ask also, do 3D data make things hard? I think yes. So first of all, acquisition of 3D data is hard. Okay, and 3D shapes do not assume a canonical definition. What I mean here is not really a function to start with. It's not a function defined over a rectangular grid. It's not a sort of video data, which is basically a function defined over a series of rectangular grids. And spatial reasoning in 3D is hard. Modeling, optimization, manipulation are all harder if you're dealing with three-dimensional data, image data. And interaction with 3D is also typically certainly classical HCI challenge. Now, in graphics, typically we acquire three-dimensional models by doing some kind of a laser scanning, and we're going to reconstruct your three-dimensional model. And that problem has been studied for a long time. Okay, that's still challenging, especially you have missing data and also dynamic data. And now with the advent of Microsoft Connect, you want to actually scan your whole world. You want to scan data in a very large scale. So these are going to offer a lot of challenges in terms of acquisition. Now, in terms of parameterization, as I said, if you're given a 3D shape, think of yourself. Think of something with maybe hygienous, with a lot of holes and handles. These could be shaped hygienous, unorganized. It's not really a function. Okay, so mathematicians have studied functions for a long time. You can differentiate, you can integrate, you have all kinds of tools developed for analysis of functions. But in graphics, they have to deal with these arbitrary 3D shapes. They're not coming as functions. Okay, one way to do is to actually turn them into functions. Then you have to cut a 3D model into pieces. Okay, where do you make the cuts? And how do you flatten each piece? How do you organize them? So that's the parameterization problem, which is difficult. And also, we cannot apply classical mathematical tools such as fast Fourier transform, one of the 10 most applied or most famous algorithms of all time. What's a fast Fourier transform for a three-dimensional bunny? Okay, so that question is actually not clearly known. And also, you don't have a sampling theorem for these three-dimensional shapes. So these are all challenges from a mathematical point of view. 3D reasoning and manipulation is hard. If you play with puzzles, these 3D puzzles are really hard. That's because humans are good at pattern recognition, but they're not so good with spatial reasoning or manipulation due to various lens distortion, occlusion, and memory load when you deal with three-dimensional objects. But many of the real-world problems are 3D because we live in a three-dimensional world. Here's just sort of a sampler of, I thought, pretty cool problems that we've worked on in the past few years. So one of this is to take these tables which are not stackable. I want to change them in a subtle way so that they can be stacked. Okay? So we call it stackabilization. It's actually a new word. And actually this sort of started everything. We actually started with other projects with a single word titles. So that problem actually may not be as easy for humans. Because humans, in order to solve this problem, you need precise measurement and transform of three-dimensional objects. So you better have a computer algorithm assist you. Another interesting problem is, so this is, we call it, remember I call it stackabilization, it's called photometric, where you start with an object which is not foldable. Okay. Now I want to again change the shape in a way that maintains its functionality, but it becomes foldable. Okay. So in this particular work, we allowed parts to be shrunk and also allowed insertion of hinges. Okay. It's like solving a little puzzle here, and in order to solve this by a human, you really need this acute sense of 3D spatial reasoning. So again, a computer algorithm can really help here. And also this problem is very hard. There's a really large search space to try to find an optimal solution. And this is one of my favorites. It's called a pyramidal decomposition. So first I'm going to tell you what is a pyramidal shape, and I'll give you a bit of a challenge. So a shape is pyramidal if it has a flat base, and the rest is like a function over this flat base. It's kind of, you can think it's like terrain-like object. So why was I interested? Because it has something to do with 3D printing. In a sense, if you want to do a 3D printing, you do this layer by layer. If the shape is pyramidal, then you will not have any waste material. If the shape has an overhang like this, you have to support it in order to be able to print this 3D object. So pyramidal shapes are kind of optimal for layered manufacturing. So if you have a shape that you want to, maybe it's too large, you want to decompose it, or generally you want to reduce the amount of waste material, the support material has to be taken out by the way after you print it. Then you may want to decompose the shape into very few pyramidal parts. Okay. So the challenge to you is you look at this shape. Again, I'll give you a 2D example. 3D example is much harder, trust me. A 2D example, I'm asking you, how can you decompose this shape into as few pyramidal shapes as possible? Can you do 3, 4, how about 2? Okay, think about it. So how many people can do this in 2 parts? Yes? Anyone? I see a hand. Yeah, count as 2. Yeah, it is 2. So we actually we asked the grad students to actually try to decompose this. These are the results they got. Okay, so one thing interesting to know that people use symmetry a lot, and the symmetry will come back later about this symmetry. Actually, you can do this in 2, but this is non-trivial. Okay, 3D is much harder. So again, these are things that computers can help. So by the way, some specific. The 3D problem is provably going to be hard, and even the 2D version for simple polygons, it's not clear. Someone claimed that on a notepad, they wrote down a proof of its being polynomial, but it's never been published. So the classical 3D challenge, okay, 3D data making things hard. Images are much easier to acquire than 3-dimensional models. Scene reconstruction, model reconstruction, these are all hard problems. And also, if you want to model things from scratch, there's really a lacking of 3D modeling tools for everyone. You need to be an expert. These people pay good money to actually learn how to use Maya to actually model 3-dimensional scenes and objects. And 3D problems are hard for humans and computers. Spatial reasoning is hard, and also typically there is a computational jump from 2D to 3D. There are some examples of problems of those sorts. So this is basically the first point. Computer graphics is hard by virtue of the fact that we inevitably have to use 3D data, manipulate 3D data, optimize for 3D data. And I also want to make a point that computer graphics really shouldn't be about producing special effects and computer games. There's just a lot of domains that computers can be useful, domains in design, manufacturing, and now 3D fabrication. I really want to sort of get that point across as well. Graphics is not just about producing pretty pictures or special effects. There's a lot more domains in which graphics can be very useful. So 3D printing, this is my remark. About 15 years ago, there was something called VRML. Okay, and then some people taunted VRML to be the reason why 3D will become ubiquitous on the internet. It really hasn't happened. Over the past 15 years, there's going to be more image data and more video data. And VRML, most people, younger people probably don't even know what VRML is. Okay. Now, actually, 3D printing just might be the blessing, because we graphics people want 3D to be ubiquitous, they want it to be everywhere. Now imagine that if in 5 years, if you have a little part at your home, then it's broken, you can already find it in the store, you want to replace it, you have a 3D printer, you can print it. If you have your children plays with toys, you want to customize the toy, and immediately want to produce a product, you can actually fabricate it using a 3D printer at home. So I think those are the reasons why 3D models will become ubiquitous, because you actually need to use 3D models in your everyday life. Okay, that may not still be the case because there's a lot of challenges for 3D printing in terms of speed, in terms of size, and other things. So this is something that I think is really interesting. Could be 3D printing fabrication could be the reason why 3D is going to inevitably have to become ubiquitous. So another challenge is just sort of one slide. I'm just going to sort of motivate on the data side, but in the realism side, it's also challenging because humans are very good at judging whether a facial expression is fake or real, whether a gait is fake or real. So there are certainly challenges from producing realistic animation, visual animation or character animation. But the thing here is that from my perspective, in most cases, these physical models are known. Okay, maybe they're by biologists. You have these muscle mechanical models for face or for limbs. The issue really is to simplify those models so that you can do things in a fast and interactive way. Okay, so the challenge, I think, really the more challenge would be that you actually don't know what model is. This is kind of what I'm going to lead towards. So I'm going to change the classical view now. We're going to keep doing synthesis. We're going to focus on modeling. Now render becomes kind of smaller. Even rendering people themselves think that global illumination rendering is kind of saturated in graphics. Instead of synthesizing just final image, we want to focus on synthesizing all visual contents. And I'm going to cross out this word explicit. We're no longer going to have an explicit model description. Our model description can be very abstract. It can be very hard to acquire, or the model is entirely unknown. You're only given some very sketchy information. You actually have to infer that model. And then with that abstract or hard to acquire or basically unknown model, you still have to synthesize your visual content. And at the end, you do render it. And another point, so I'm crossing the images, the synthesis of images to visual contents. I'm also going to get a novel content. So this content is not something physically existing in the world. It's something that's completely new, or will be very creative, very imaginative. It's a novel content. So I'm going to say the challenge is to, the new graphics definition of computer graphics, at least I want it to be, is to go from an abstract model, or maybe just a bunch of examples, to produce novel content. So here are some examples. So one work done is with Tsinghua University from 2013. It's called a sketch to scene. So your model description is a human sketch, which is something you can easily produce, and you want to turn that into a three-dimensional indoor scene. And our work a bit earlier is try to, well, this is the ultimate challenge, is to do a Google image search of chair. You get these chair images. I want to turn every chair into a 3D model easily. Okay, this is certainly, it's really a you pose problem. In both cases, you need some extra knowledge. It's not enough to just have a single sketch, or just have a single image. Okay, so this has to be data-driven, knowledge-driven. Okay, so as long as you have a pre-analyzed set of three-dimensional models, you can use them to help you produce three-dimensional realization of a sketch or an image. Okay, so this is kind of what we did before. So we take the chair image, we have pre-analyzed a set of 3D chair models. Okay, so what we did was very simple actually. We just select one that seems right from the right view, and then we just work it based on the silhouette. Very simple. Okay, but I think I started things up, and then people had follow-ups and try to attack more challenging problems. And second example, suppose the input is just a set of examples that are related. So I give you a set of chairs, or a set of bicycles, or a set of lamps. Please produce more of the same. But they're all different, but more sort of, they're all chairs, they're all bicycles. But you can also try to be creative about the chairs or bicycles. So the hard problem is actually the analysis. So we call it co-analysis, because you're analyzing a set of models instead of individual ones. You need to understand the commonality and diversity of the set of models you're provided with. And with that understanding of the shape category, you're able to create more things belonging to that category. So this is work done by Stanford from 3 years ago. So they take a set of models belonging to the same category, and then gonna learn a probabilistic model. Okay, and if they're able to do that, the rest is pretty easy. A new model is just something from that probabilistic distribution. So here is an image from their work. They started with these green models of tractors, then they're able to generate many thousands more variations of original models. Okay. But if you really look closely, these variations are actually very minor. Okay, so this is work done 3 years ago. Now people are trying to give a more structural variation. So now that's just almost like some simple deformation of the original green models. So really, I think research in geometric modeling, at least in computer graphics, is key on understanding, shape understanding. And only when you can understand that shape category, you'll be able to generate more of the same from that category. So that things like, what is a bicycle? So this is not a surprise. Data, knowledge, and learning plays the key almost anywhere it's the case in computer graphics as well, at least in new computer graphics. So the third example is to do inverse modeling. Okay, again, you're going to start with maybe one or more models, and you're going to infer a generative model. And with that generative model, the generative means that it can generate. It has the power to generate. Then you can have novel synthesis to get new models. The key or the hard problem is actually the inverse analysis. The forward problem is relatively easier. So here is an example. So again, the note is graphics is not the new graphics at least is not necessarily the forward problem anymore. I think I would even say most of the hard problems for the problem people are mostly interested in graphics are more or less inverse problems. So here's an example, so an opportunity to sort of tell you so my fascination with symmetry. I just think symmetry is really cool. Okay, here's a very simple example. So you go to a subway or something, you look at a wall and you see there's a dent on the wall, and then the question is what happened to it? Everyone's, oh, someone kicked the wall and there's a dent. Nobody would think that there were many dents and then they were erased and then one dent was left. Okay, so why do you think that way? So people thought about this question. Okay, so someone proposed this notion that inverting the history of a shape or something like a pattern is about symmetry restoration. He had this idea that everything starts with something very simple, perfectly symmetric, and symmetry are being broken and broken and broken and broken in a way, and eventually led to your final product. Okay, so that's kind of one philosophy. So inverting history is about symmetry restoration, and generating history about symmetry breaking. And another notion that people are familiar with is so-called Occam's razor, that if you have a explanation, the right explanation tends to be the simplest one. So these ideas are actually in a book by Michael Layton. He claims to be a computer vision person, but he doesn't really publish a lot of computer vision, but he writes books. He writes sort of philosophical points. I think most of them are really good, but he doesn't have realization. Actually, we were inspired by some of his points, and we actually try to realize of some of his works. So these two books are actually very fascinating reads: Symmetry, Causality and Mind, and also Generative Theory of Shapes. So as a first attempt, we try to build a generative model to explain a structure. So we start with 2D structures, and we chose, at the end, 2D facades. Okay, so these are sort of patterns outside of a building. So we try to say, how do we find a model that generated these facades? And then if we have such a model, and later on we can produce more variations of facades. So our model is going to be a hierarchical decomposition. Okay, we take a model, we try to build a hierarchy starting from something very simple, and then we're going to do a decomposition. And at the end, we're going to produce a final facade. And then when are we going to stop? We're going to stop when you have a perfect, a regular grid. We say that grid is perfectly symmetric, you don't need any more explanation. Now, in terms of the basic decomposition operations, one of them is a split. It's a two-way split. You take your facade, okay, like that. You can split it horizontally or vertically. Okay, so this is kind of one of the split operations. You got two substructures. And another split operation is actually along the depth direction. Okay, so this is called layering. So if you look at this, maybe you imagine there's like maybe a single door here and many windows. The question is the decomposition from many splits, or you have kind of a regular grid, you have one door overlaid on top of it. Okay, without the latter one is a simpler explanation, so we also introduce layer operation. Okay. Now, with these two basic operations, lateral splits and also layering, you still have many possible decomposition of a given 2D facade. And the question is, how do you define an objective to tell you what is the optimal hierarchical decomposition? So here we follow these ideas of simplest explanation is usually the best one. Simplest means the fewest decomposition. And then we use symmetry as a major cue for this kind of analysis. So basically, you minimize the number of decompositions. You basically want every split to produce two substructures that are maximally symmetric, if you can. Okay, so with that, one thing led to another, you can formulate an optimization problem. You can solve it, and you get your hierarchical decomposition. And with that tree, you can actually vary it. You can produce all kinds of variations. You can do editing by adding that hierarchy, or you can do retargeting, meaning that if you have a building and then you stretch it or you condense it, you can adjust its structure in a reasonable way, according to the generative model. So again, new graphics, requires hard analysis and is not necessarily a forward problem after all. So there's one thing that I actually try to hide in the Wikipedia page for computer graphics, computer science. Actually, Wikipedia now is catching up, but this actually was not the case 2 years ago. Okay, there's something new that was added. So computer graphics is a method of digitally synthesizing and manipulating visual content. So inside of images, it's all visual content. And but one thing I think should be added is I think the challenge is novelty of the content. Okay? Not just all visual content, but novel content is a big challenge. And also in that textbook, there was a remark, much of current research in graphics is in methods for creating geometric models, makes me a very happy and modeling person, methods for representing circular plans, blah, 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 and there's an increasing integration of techniques from computer vision. So if anyone tells you computer vision graphics are opposite of each other, you tell them that's wrong. It's not a new vision it's not a new graphics, it's not even a new vision, new computer vision. Okay, now, things are gonna become a little bit controversial. So shape understanding and inverse modeling are very much vision-like problems, okay? Many years ago, I claimed that I worked mainly on vision-like problems for geometric shapes. Now, in a sense, that graphics is just catching up with computer vision. Now, could we do more? 4 years ago, CGRAPH was held in Vancouver, and they gave the achievement award to Jin Kajia. So he's the guy actually who did the rendering equation computer graphics. So he gave a talk, and then he started to talk with this question: what human capabilities do various computer science disciplines attempt to supplement or replace? So some answers are somewhat obvious. Numerics and algorithms is our capability to compute, to infer. Database data mining, memory, knowledge discovery. Artificial intelligence, of course, is human intelligence. Computer vision is pattern detection and recognition. And then, hey, how about computer graphics? Actually, sort of people start to think, I say, certainly not image generation. Certainly not just try to, explain how to generate an image. So he also gave a pause, and he gave this answer. He says that computer graphics really ought to strive for realizing or supplement human in terms of human imagination. Okay? Well, it's his answer, not my answer. I'm just relaying that. Of course, this actually generates a lot of discussions. Are you trying to do too much? Are you trying to oversell computer graphics? But at least this is inspiring. That computer graphics ought to strive for supplementing human imagination. So now graphics and image. By the way, there's a book by David Hilbert. It's called Geometry and Imagination. I think everyone should go take a look. So it's really one of the most classical book, and also it's so easy to read. Okay? So I'm trying to steal that graphics and imagination. Think of the various special effects you see in films. Think of all the animated fantasy films, and also think of the virtual worlds that graphics is helping us create. So indeed, graphics allows our imagination to be realized, at least virtually. If you can imagine, hopefully graphics techniques can help you realize that. And in addition, it allows a mental concept to turn into a digital realization, and you could actually possibly fabricate it, I think, to complete the loop. I think that's really what computer graphics ought to do. We still have a long way to go. So there's some smart ideas, data-driven, data reuse, co-analysis, etc. And the future of computer graphics is in this: data, knowledge, and learning. And I'm not quite done yet. So with the data being mentioned so many times, let's look at whether computer graphics actually really fits this sort of whole data-driven learning paradigm. If you do a Google image search for chair, you get 64 million results. Maybe that's even not as many as you would expect, but if you do a search in the 3D warehouse, which is the largest 3D online repository, you get 25K. Bicycles is 30 million versus 1,200, and strollers, because my small kids, I'm starting to not do chairs, strollers now. It's 5 million versus 36. There's only 36 digital models of 3D strollers. So really, there's no big visual or big 3D data yet. Okay. So what's the problem with small 3D data? There's a lack of knowledge for learning-based 3D synthesis. There's a lack of examples for example-based 3D synthesis. The synthesis or analysis are key problems, but we don't have the data. So how can you do data-driven really well? This is one more reason why graphics is hard, because you actually lack that data to help you with data, knowledge, and learning. The smaller is the detriment to these three big words. So there are some solutions attempts. One is to utilize the vast availability of image data to help 3D analysis. We call it the projective shape analysis. Essentially, we actually segment 2D images, and then we use that to help with 3D segmentation. You see strollers here? And it actually goes the other way. This is work from computer vision. If you have available 3D data, 3D models, you can actually take pictures from various angles to get a lot of depth images. You can use these depth images to actually help with understanding of images. So this is the work from Princeton called the sliding shape. So they have these 3D models, they take depth images, and then slide these depth images in image data, and then try to detect objects. So here's some catchy thing to say. Maybe I'm not the first person who said it. That's unfortunate. So picture is worth 1,000 words. A 3D model is worth 1,000 images. So if you can synthesize good 3D data, actually goes a long way to help with graphics and computer vision. To fix this small 3D data problem, you need to synthesize more and more 3D models, not just simple deformations like the stuff that we have done. You need more variation and novelty. Another flash, just so that you get the point. The novel switches actually enhance your knowledge. Okay, I'm not done yet. Can we go further? Beyond realization of human imagination, can graphics enhance certain human capability? So one thing that I'm interested in recently is actually human creativity. Imagination and creativity are closely tied. So I thought I discovered something new, but that's not the case. But the question is, can computer help humans become more creative? It turns out that people already thought about it for a long time. So there's this Wikipedia page on computational creativity, and on that page, it gave sort of a roadmap for this pursuit. So it gave 3-tiered goals. The ultimate goal is to construct a program that is capable of human creativity. And if that is too hard, let's at least try to understand creativity, design something which is not creative, but it can assist humans in becoming more creative. I think the majority of the work so far is here. So there's still a lot more over there, a lot to do over there. So an attempt we did 3 years ago was called Fit and Diverse. So we tried to use computer graphics techniques to help humans create 3D models that are perhaps more creative. So essentially, this is how it works. So the computer is going to start with some examples, and it's going to generate more examples. As a human, you play the god here. You kind of say, I like this, I don't like this. You select, okay? And then you give the feedback to the computer is going to generate more models. And you can say, I like this, I don't like this, and then it's going to generate more models. You get a generations and a generation and generation of 3D models. Some of them are actually very surprising and interesting and creative. So we call that at least a first attempt of creative 3D model. Here are some examples. We call it Fit and Diverse because the paradigm here is evolutionary computing. Okay, we're going to follow the basic operations of evolution, and the fit and diverse are terms from evolutionary biology. So fit in our setting is possibility. If you start with a set of bicycles or strollers, you should create bicycles or strollers. You should not be creating other things. But diverse is that you need to have surprises. Okay, if your generation is going to generate only an elite population, we know from biology that this elite population is not really good for survival. If you have one virus that just kills that specific elite population, they're going to die. You actually have diversity so that your species can survive. So in our case, we want to have diversity, which means that the shape needs to vary. Okay, they can just be single kind of shape. And then the basic operations are part mutation and crossover. Okay, again, these are terms for operations on DNAs. Okay, you can replace symbols, or you can cross over, basically replacing symbols. In our case, the symbols become parts for your shapes. Okay, so with that, you can generate normal 3D contents. And there are surprises because there's always a stochastic element to this evolution computation. And backtrack, 1994. Okay, so what I was told that this is one of the few, maybe the only CGRAPH paper presentation that I actually got a standing ovation of the presentation. This is work done by Carl Sims. So he's one of the winners of the Genius Award. What is it called? MacArthur Fellowships. So very early on, he actually created a system that that showed that how little simple creatures can learn how to swim, how to grab, and how to run. Okay, so one of the really impressive. This is very early work on. This is very much to try to it's evolution computing, and you actually create creative behaviors after you learn. This is current work by one of my master's students. We try to ask ourselves, it looks to me that most of the creative modeling works are some kind of evolutionary computing in that kind of framework. Let's try to ask, is it possible to do an alternative? So we thought, and we searched, in fact, there is. So this is called a co-creation. So the idea here is that people collaborate to create something. And if you do a search, the co-creation is not really in a scientific display, it's about management or teamwork and things like that. So if people collaborate, and they actually don't know exactly or precisely what the other people are doing, you tend to be creative. You know your role, you only get a vague hint of what the other person is doing, okay? So there's an interesting thing called explicit quirks. So it's about people trying to draw. So suppose that the three people, one person draws the head, the other person draws the torso, the other person draws the legs. But you only give a very vague hint of what is the previous person drawing. You try to be creative about your part. People get all kinds of creative human-like models. You can also do that for stories. Okay, you can write a few sentences of a story. You only give a hint to the next person, the last sentence or last word. The person will start with the story. You can actually generate a very interesting storyline. So we try to do this for 3D models. Try to develop a tool to generate 3D models. Okay, so now I'm kind of done. So summary, why is graphics hard? So 3D manipulation, reasoning, and design is hard. So this is the 3D challenge. Synthesis of 3D, especially novel 3D content, is hard because the model is not explicit. Maybe it's abstract and it's very hard to acquire. Maybe it is unknown. I only give you a set of examples. You have to learn the model for them. And also the lack of big 3D data to support data-driven approaches. And finally, realizing and enhancing human imagination and creativity is hard because we probably don't even know what are the right problems to ask. Okay, so this makes the exploration very open. So new graphics, it's synthesis challenges. It's all about synthesis. Okay, but as you will see that I never mentioned synthesis of the final image. Synthesis without explicit model description, that's a challenge. Synthesize novel 3D content is a challenge. Synthesize big 3D data, volume and variation, two big V's, is hard. Also synthesize to help analysis. Okay, analysis does help synthesis because you have to understand to be able to synthesize right. But synthesis, if you have the models, you can also go the other way to help analysis. And finally, synthesize creative 3D content, certainly an open problem. So I hope a lot of people are being inspired to work on these problems. And again, we're only scratching the surface. There's a lot to do. And finally, this is sort of a bit of a hope of fun. I talk about creativity. If you do a search on quotes on creativity, it doesn't come from scientists or mathematicians. It actually comes from an actor. So as one of my favorite movies called A Fish Called Wanda. So that lawyer is played by Zhang. He actually gave talks about creativity. He has a YouTube video. They have a lot of quotes. So one of the quotes is creativity is not a talent, it's a way of operating. It actually gives us hope that you can actually understand maybe in a mechanical way what creativity is and then do something about it. And then there's this tree with everything about creativity. One of them is vision. And actually this vision is not computer vision. This vision is about seeing, okay, seeing what you're creating and exploring that, and then that really is computer graphics. So I'll tell Greg why I even started to do this talk sometime. So that's it. Thank you very much.
So was that visionary?
A very
Yes.
naive questions. Like so, I'm interested to see you're talking about creativity, right, for the computer graphics, create the new chairs, new subjects. It's like a new car, something new truck.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds for me like it's basically you can decompose the the structure to some elements, and then you can do some random combination of the elements together.
Yes.
Generate a new object. Like, what's the difficulty for that part? I mean, it sounds like a pretty.
So it sounds like a question from statistics. So yeah, if you're in computer vision graphics, you know that this segmentation is hard, and correspondence is also hard. So, and those are the basic requirements to understand a shape or a shape collection. Okay, so those are hard analysis problems. So nobody will tell you segmentation is a solved problem. Nobody will tell you correspondence is a solved problem. And there are different levels. You can just try to correspond the rough parts. Say those are legs, that's a back, and then that's sort of a coarse level correspondence. You can go even finer detail. You actually want to actually correspond those really detailed parts, and that's actually a new challenge that we have done some work on. So to answer your question, yeah, so those are already hard problems. And then those are the basics for you to understand the category, and then you try to generate. And to generate something new, it's just beyond just replacing parts, because then you may actually not be able to get something that's creative. So to get a creative content creation, that's another level of question, I think. Maybe here or then there. Yeah. Doesn't matter, yeah.
I was curious about, you said computer graphics isn't just about images or pictures, but what would you say is the relationship between computer graphics, the field, and then graphic artists and people who work with 3D models artistically? Like, would you say that maybe approaches like this to produce new models are meant to supplement them or to replace them?
Well, maybe both. In a sense, I think certainly graphics people should work more with artists and designers. And when we have these works on the stabilization and photometric, usually the emails we got are from designers. And certainly to replace them, it's just so they don't have to do a lot of manual work. Maybe that's a good thing. And certainly to supplement. Okay, so I think that they have worked a lot actually on the creativity side. If you look at works done on computational creativity, they are not from graphics people or actually computer science people. These are people from the arts. But maybe our tools can help them. So certainly I hope there's going to be a conversation, more of a conversation between the two disciplines. Yes?
I'm curious about the relationship between the computer graphics and the recent popular virtual reality techniques. Is there any relationship, or what's its position in this computer graphics field?
Since every field wants to claim that it's part of it, so I would say virtual reality could be part of computer graphics. It's just something that is more recent and more popular. Actually, a lot of the researchers in virtual reality were in computer graphics. I can give you a lot of names. Steve Feiner, for example, he's a graphics. He's actually one of the authors of that book. He's recently giving a lot of talks on virtual reality because that's how he got started. It's just becoming more popular. I wouldn't say that it's something that's really new. It's just becoming more popular, driven by these lenses and other things, maybe by the advent of hardware. So I would say it's related. I can say it's part of graphics. No people in VR here?
I want to make a comment regarding
Sure,
that
yeah,
question.
please
I
go
think
ahead.
augmented reality or virtual reality is a very good example of the combination of computer graphics and computer vision. So like Richard said, computer graphics is about helping us to imagine things like those beautiful special effects you see in the movie theater. Now with augmented reality, actually you need some help from computer vision side to align this kind of virtually rendered objects or things with the real objects you see in this room. You can see, maybe some kind of movie character is jumping throughout of the window. You can see this kind of thing happening in the real environment, right? So to me, it's like a very good combination of vision and graphics. Okay.
And I just want to point out that the Groovy Lab is the sort of usually called the graphics lab at SFU. This is our name, Groovy, and the logo is new. We actually have a logo contest. So Groovy now stands for Graphics Union with Vision. Okay, so certainly we're doing graphics and vision, and we try to make them work together. So I think that's certainly the best way.
Could you please predict several hotspots of of research of feature study in computer graphics?
I thought at the high level I gave you a few. Okay, I think creative modeling is something I think is interesting. It's a bit fuzzy now, so people need to work on it to make it more concrete. And on a more sort of on the details, I think trying to understand the functionality is something. In terms of segmentation, people mostly work on geometry. Okay, first people ask where should I cut? So psychology people say you cut where it's have negative curvature. So that's like the geometric criteria for segmentation and cutting. But functional segmentation and functional correspondence is the ultimate solution to these two problems. So what is functionality? Understand it, develop descriptors, and computer vision we actually studied it. It's called affordance. So mostly it's like functionality is about interaction. To understand functionality, you have to have a human interact with this object or the scene to understand functionality and where things happen. And recently we worked on object-object interaction. Okay, so I think that's should be a hot topic. Again, it's a bit fuzzy, but again, more people need to study to make it more concrete. And fabrication, I think, is going to remain hot, just because it's very new. It's emerging, and a lot of people are excited about this, and there are a lot of new 3D printers and new technologies being developed. So graphics, in terms of geometric modeling, is trying to find new problems that match up with fabrication. I think that's going to remain as a hot area to look into.
Is there any, in general, some computability and checkability problems in the
What's the last word? Checkability?
checkability, like whether the problem is checkable
Oh,
or
trackable.
computable? Because some of the aspects you mentioned, they sound like goes beyond our computability, like the current Turing machine architecture.
I think
Creativity, for example.
tractability depends on how you define a problem. If you want to solve a problem, publish a paper, you can define a problem that is tractable.
Mhm.
Or in a way, you have to define a problem you can solve in 6 months to submit to a certain conference, right? So it really depends on how you define a problem. And sometimes research, the defining of the right problem is 30% to 50% of the challenge. So computer graphics, I would say computer graphics is theoretical. It's mostly applied, and there's a lot of engineering. So this is why it's very important to define the right problem that we can solve.
And a final question there.
Yeah, sorry, for the new graphics, which you have the definition of producing visual and novel content, do you include creativity in that novelty, or do you think that if there are more work on creativity, then in a few years it may add as a separate term there?
I think so. I mean, these words you can define in various ways. I can define novelty in a very general way, then creativity is part of it. No, novelty only refers to that. It's not something that exists, that you can actually take a picture and then just reconstruct it. It is something that's imaginative, it's not there. It's something totally new. But creativity, I think, is a little bit different. It's really something that, for example, you have to ask people whether it's creative, and people can defer in their opinions. So I think it's a little bit different, maybe more fuzzier.
Yeah, because I think that you can, there is not a very specific definition for creativity and what is creative or what is not. You should ask people, yeah, but.
I forgot her name. There's a Stanford professor here. He writes about creativity. So people try to offer how to define creativity. But one thing is always the element of surprise, and also need to have constraint. Creativity is not total randomness. You need to have an element of surprise, but also you have to be well constrained.
Yeah.
So this is kind of fits exactly fit and diverse.
Thanks.
Okay, let's thank Richard again. Thank you very much. And we're looking forward to next semester. First, if you have any suggestions or ideas